before I start, I just want to thank and congratulate everybody at SMPTE for all they do in putting the session together today. We're going to be looking at musical events for cinema, which are really becoming a wonderful new opportunity for theater owners. It's cinematic, and it also really creates that sense of being there for an audience. And I just brought a little bit of data. ComScore compiled this for us. You can see that concert films, these are the biggest concert films to date, really can provide a lot of opportunities for theater owners, and the Taylor Swift actually was highest grossing domestic box office ever in the genre, and second largest globally. And we're going to talk about how these are created today. I'd like to introduce on the end Jackie Brenneman, a huge champion of cinema for many, many years. She's a founding partner of the Fithian Group, a global cinema industry consultancy firm. Prior to that, she was executive vice president and general counsel of the National Association of Theater Owners. Seated next to me is John Ross, president and founder of Laurel Canyon Live. He's going to tell us more about what his company is doing, and he's worked on concert films with IMAX, and in particular with Taylor Swift and Beyonce this past year. And joining us remotely is Grammy-nominated and Emmy-winning director Sam Wrench, who directed the Taylor Swift Eras Tour this past year, and has also worked on live events with Billie Eilish, BTS, and many others. Welcome, Sam.
Hi there, how you doing?
So since we have Sam remotely, I think we're going to start. Sam, why don't you take maybe up to 15 minutes and tell the group about how you're producing your concert films today.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's worth telling you, how the process comes together, because I think that in turn informs, how we kind of get to this moment of scale, and we get to these successes. So I have a couple of slides that will just take us through the kind of process. So the projects start out with very early meetings with usually a show creative director. And what we're looking at here is a very early Zoom call from a project we did in London. Most of these shows that we do are pre-existing, and so they exist anyway, and we come in and we have to try and work out how to convey that for cinema. And so a lot of that's about the collaboration with people that already built the show or have already come up with the show, and understanding really where things are happening, how they're happening, how long they're taking to happen, and how we might be able to just slightly change them to either work better for cinema or to capture them in the right way. Because one of the other really big, considerations is that all these events have tickets mostly already sold. And like I say, if a show pre-exists, audience have an expectation. And so different to a traditional film or traditional capture is that your footprint has to be incredibly light, because you can't put cameras wherever you want them. And so really it's about, working through and really understanding the show and how that show comes together before you build a camera plot. And most of these things start, with a conversation with the artist about how they want that show to feel, or how does the show feel to them, and how do they want it to feel to the audience in the cinemas or at home. And different artists have different takes. Some want the show to feel like it comes from the audience perspective, and that, what does it feel like to be in that crowd, to be up high. Some of them want it to feel like, what does it feel like when you're on stage with me, and you're there and kind of over my shoulder. And so really we take a very kind of broad approach to that first conversation, and then take those key words that come out of that and then start to build a camera plot. And so the camera plot ends up being a fairly complex process that can take anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks to fully put together. Again, kind of back to the restrictions that are in place. You have a venue that has hard walls. You have a stage that is a certain size. between those hard walls and that stage are audience in seats or spaces that have already been sold, and the little gaps that do exist usually exist per fire regulations. And so trying to work out how to bring the filming apparatus into that space in a way that is both safe and delivers creatively, and then will get past authorities, and we can work with authorities to make that is really the challenge. And I spend my life having these conversations. The fire marshal doesn't care what the shot's going to be. Like, they have very little interest in how good something might be. They want to keep their 6 foot or their 8 foot distance, and rightly so, because no one's going to remember the shot if everyone has to get out there very quickly. And so it's part of my job, at least initially, to work out where those cameras need to be, and what's going to give us that cinematic intention, and then what's also going to convey those keywords that we've taken from the artist, whether that be scale, whether that be intimacy, whether that be kind of raw energy, whatever those keywords are. What cameras can we use, and what camera positions can we use to capture that? Sometimes you're filming over multiple nights, and so that camera plot build, on the left here, I think this is night 2 from Taylor. You're building a camera plot over multiple nights, so we're concentrating on maybe one side or one particular aspect, and then the next night we're going to move all those positions and concentrate on another aspect. And then on the right of that document, you can kind of see the level of detail that we'll go into. So, each position, we know exactly how high that position can go, how low it can go.
Hey, Sam.
Yes?
Hey, Sam, are you planning to share some slides? Because we don't see anything on screen.
Sorry. My apologies, maybe it didn't come through. Can you see that now? There we go.
There we go.
Okay, all right. I'll skip through this bit. So, but this was the kind of meeting that I was first referring to, where we're really looking through the show in a very basic form, within a PDF document, and understanding that show and how it comes together with the creatives. And then from there, we build out the camera plot. And this is the document I was referring to that you guys couldn't see. So within this document, we have that level of detail of exactly how high the cameras go, the distances they can go, the exact lenses that are going to be used on each camera. And me and the DOP start to build out how we can convey the show through these positions, and how we might do that over multiple nights, and give ourselves multiple options. And then we take all of this to the fire marshal and seek approval, essentially. What that ends up meaning is that you're kind of coming down to, inches of space. And we may know of, a track that exists in Germany that is 4 inches thinner than the tracks that exist in the US. And so for that, you bring in the people from Germany, and you bring in that track. Or we know of a particular operator that has this custom piece of kit in Vancouver, and it ends up being a very broad basis of people that work on these things, because everyone's built specific pieces of camera kit for their specific need, and they tend to be spread out across the world. For the Taylor show, for example, we use the Chapman grip department that they use on the football, because they have long lenses that can change in height, whereas traditionally our long lenses and our close-ups would be one fixed height. Within this concert, her close-up changed from 6 foot above stage height, which was about 5 foot, to 16 foot, and so we needed a close-up camera that can do that. And so we looked at the sports department, sports kind of world, and put in equipment from there. The spider cam on this particular project was from a company called Tate that builds staging, but they also build automation, and they had a spider cam system that we could automate moves and know that exactly where that camera was going to be. And so really it's looking at each project in a very custom way and unique way to bring in the right equipment for that project. Once we have that kind of camera plot in place and we have fire marshal approval and we feel confident, we then go into previs. And so what we're looking at here is what we might receive. The top left image is a rehearsal video that I might get from a choreographer or creative director. That would then come into previs. This is an Unreal previs where we're looking, we've got the model, we're looking at exactly what those lenses can do and how our camera plot can move around. And from that, I would camera script, which is what we can see in the top right here, using a system called QPilot, that I can put in the exact cuts that I want and the exact camera direction I want, each camera to have. And then the image below is the final product of that project. And so it's about kind of starting out with these big, broad creative bases, whether we want scale, whether we want intimacy, how we want the viewer to feel, and then narrowing down into a level of detail that means that we can capture this with one go. That's the other kind of massive challenge with these things, is that we're in a cinematic medium where, usually you'd be afforded multiple takes, and we rarely are. Maybe we get 2 nights, but the chances of those cameras being in the same position both nights is slim. So you really have one time to get these things. And the way to combat that is to prepare to a degree that you simply know exactly what you're going to get most of the time. And so the document in the middle of this page is what the cameras would have. They would have a camera script that tells them exactly at what time their shot is and what we want them to get at each of those shots. And then I would, on the day, I would have a team around me that can talk them through that live during the show. And so this kind of level of detail is really what's more recently allowed us to, I guess, step up and kind of change the way these things are captured into something that's more similar to a storyboard or to cinema, and generally raise the quality of that. We're kind of not, it's rare that we now approach these events by just turning up with a bunch of cameras and pointing them in the right direction. There's always a high level of detail that goes into planning any of these, and that's collaborating with staging and with lighting and with choreo and then obviously ultimately the cameras and the DOP. The next one is I guess a very advanced version of that, where we previs every single shot to the and the choreo. We have no real rehearsal videos, bar kind of dancer room stuff that you can see on the bottom left here. And we work with an Unreal artist to go through exactly what we're going to get and the exact frame size and exactly what we want to see, and then we send that to stakeholders. This is, I guess, an approach that's more appropriate for maybe branded stuff or for specific graphical stuff where the camera needs to be in exact place at exact time to be able to convey what we want. You can see in the top the frame here is that camera script counting down and the different shots that we're trying to get at those times. And so really we put these things together in different ways, but depending on the project and depending on how we want the audience to feel. But ultimately it's about preparing enough so that you can take the element of risk, if not out, completely down from the kind of turn up and see what happens type approach. Okay. There's my slides. Hopefully you can still see me. And I think the kind of general approach to these is to really capture what the artist has already done. Like they've already created a show, they've already made something that the world is seeing and that people are experiencing, and really at my job and the team's job is to understand what the key values of that show are, and translate those to screen, and then also bring those into the living rooms or into the cinemas in a way that gives you more access and gives you a better, if not a better sense of the show, a equal sense of the show of being, that you would get when you're there. And we kind of start each show with that fresh in our minds as the overall ambition, if that makes sense. Hopefully that was a little bit of a sense of the process and how those things come together.
How far in advance do you begin something like this, the planning process?
It varies. I think any less than 2 months out is always what you describe as a bit scary. It's definitely been done, but there's some projects that we start talking the week after, a year out. If it's a yearly project. There's other projects that I think sort of 4 to 6 months is usually normal, and maybe not all the elements are in place. You know, we don't have a venue, but we know we want to do a show, or we haven't picked the venue yet. You know, or we know they want to do something, but the financing isn't in place. But I think the conversations tend to start, you know, 6 months out is always a nice timeline.
And when you're selecting which show and which venue, what are the considerations that you're looking for?
I think first and foremost is crowd energy. The crowds are a very different venue to venue, city to city, country to country, you know. And so what's the vibe of the gig going to be is definitely up there. And then it's about, I guess, artist, where the artist is in the tour, you know, like, do you film the last date? That was always kind of a risky one from a tiredness point of view, from a voice point of view, from just a risk factor of like if the show goes wrong. But you also don't want to film too early because these shows evolve and they get better and better, and the artist gets more and more comfortable. And then, you know, so I guess those are probably the main ones. And then also venue, you know, like SoFi, for example, is a new venue. It looks great. Everything's clean. The cabling is all in the right place. There's other venues that have, you know, little bit more worn, that are trickier to shoot around and kind of bring that tech into. So there's kind of a myriad of factors that dictate where we end up doing stuff.
And since obviously sound is so important, would you elaborate on capturing the sound live and then, of course, the mix?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely defer to John on the mix. But the capturing the sound live, I think, there are obviously venues that are better than others, you know, in terms of how they sound. And as we move into the kind of more cinema space, and even, you know, most of the streamers now is an Atmos delivery, making sure that we have the spread of mics that we need to be able to rebuild that atmosphere is very important. You know, you're usually going into an environment where you have an artist team that is very good and very understanding of what they need to capture musically. But it becomes very important that we also have all the other elements, i.e. the crowd and the sense of crowd from different parts. And then it's about working with people like John and the mixers to really convey that and also technically, you know, make sure that the sync and the sense of being in the space works, you know, whether obviously you mix differently for a close-up than you would a wide, and that kind of, there's a bit of the post-production process where that becomes a constant back and forth. You know, that luckily for me and John, we have a very easy shorthand, and so you just know what the other one's going to do. But that process is a kind of a big collaboration between, you know, the outside mixer, the artist team mixer, and then myself and my producing team as well.
While we have this working and we have the opportunity, does anyone have any questions at this stage? Yeah, there's a mic there, if you would, please.
Yeah, for playback in the theaters, are you guys trying to use normal cinema standards for playback so that when the audience goes in the theater and hears it, they're just not blown out or overwhelmed by the SPL?
I'll answer that question at some point. Happy to do that now if you want.
All right, thank you.
Unless you want to finish here.
No, go for it, John. I think it's an interesting point because I think it has changed recently, right? Like I think our kind of recent projects, we've done a lot more work on making sure that that bit of it is consistent.
Okay. This is theaters typically do run at a standard 85 dB, and which is 7 on the Dolby scale, if you want to look at that. A problem that you have now is a lot of theaters do not run at that level just because they fear of litigation, whatever, from movies that are played way too loud. This was a big problem for us actually doing concerts, because in the concert world you really want to have that visceral feel of power. So actually when we were doing the Taylor run-throughs, we went on, I think about 8 o'clock one morning to Burbank AMC just to run through with their head projectionists. And I took everybody upstairs to the booth and I showed them that not one theater there was actually running at reference level. So one thing that was that was unique with the Taylor Swift organization, and the organization means the fan base too, is that they put the word out amongst the Swifties, and they came down on all the theater managers pretty much wherever it played, and they made sure the film actually ran at 7. This is actually a big problem for movies, for concert movies playing in theater.
And we had, just to counter that, we had, when we did Billy, we had problems where it was playing so quietly that you couldn't even hear her. And I remember I was at a screening in LA, and it happened to be me and a senior member of the label was also there that I didn't know, and it was us two stood in the corridor looking for the cinema manager, going, "You can't hear her sing." And I think that almost a new standard needs to be addressed or to be widely, put out that allows for these things to be consistently good.
Yeah, can I ask the question? Anil Vanvari from Indian Television in India. Just checking, despite all the pre-visualization, the planning, what are the challenges you faced on post, and how did you get around them?
Challenge on post-production, you mean? I guess the challenges in post are what are the challenges? Well, none of the challenges are insurmountable, to be honest. You can always work around. I think timeline is an interesting one. Most of these have quite a quick turnaround. For them to be commercially successful and for them to feel relevant, they need to go out within a reasonable time frame of the concert. In most cases, I think putting something out 2 years later or 3 years later definitely isn't really an option for most artists, because they moved on, if not musically, stylistically, whatever it may be. And so, the Taylor one, for example, was captured 6th of August. It was in the cinemas by the 13th of October. That doesn't need that much time to edit 43 songs. And so the timeline is an interesting one. There's obviously a technical challenge, that it was 100 cameras in the end, and that's 100 cameras in a Premiere multi-clip. But actually, we've done a lot of these now, and we work with an amazing team at Blink that really get it and understand how to build those projects in a way that allows you to keep moving and also work across multiple edits. And so, the main challenge really, I think, with these is the workflow and the process, because you're mixing whilst you're still editing, you're doing VFX whilst you're still editing offline. Everything's happening at the same time, and it's not all happening in the same building. But once you've done a few of them, and you work with the same collaborators each time, you get into a really great workflow of understanding that.
Why don't we move on? And we're going to hear from John, who's going to talk a little more.
Yes, hi. So I worked with Sam on a few projects. We did a Brandy Carlisle live to IMAX event, which was basically live to I think at the time was 100 IMAX theaters. Ironically done on my pool deck, and then since then, obviously we've done other shows that were more done classically movie style. But what all of the things that all these shows have in common is we definitely prove that there's a market for putting alternate content into theaters if it's done correctly. People have been making concert movies for a while. Going back to U2, Rattle and Hum. Back in the day, but I think they've always been somewhat compromised. Now you have a few venues where you can actually create that visceral effect of the type of energy that you might have in a real live concert where you experience it with other folks. One is obviously at an actual concert, and the other one is actually in a movie theater, if it is done correctly. Sam definitely captured Taylor in such a manner that you basically had the best seat in the house. And our mandate was to mix it and present it to an audience with the same power and presentation that you might have actually been there. And in many cases, depending upon where you were in that arena, you more than likely did have the best seat in the house. And so this is something that uniquely can be done in theater. What our company is doing is obviously we do the post-production aspect where we work with folks that capture films in physical locations. We do the post-production, we mix them and put them out there. We've done that with quite a few artists at this point. But we're moving into more of the live space now. So we have a rack device that can go on tour with artists that takes the time code from these venues, which is most of the things are done to time code now just because of the complexity of staging and so on and so forth. We take that information and we capture 128 microphones from that location. We can control multiple cameras from that location. The nuances of which are, the director controls a lot of that nuance and predetermines a lot of that stuff. But it comes back to us as a JPEG XS file. It's all switched on location, and then 128 discrete audio channels, which we mix in a live, in a theater basically, which is capable of IMAX 12050, Atmos 5171. And then we have a distribution system. And what that distribution system is, it's an app that we developed actually along with Dolby called Laurel Canyon Live. You can find it out there now. And it pushes Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos down to the iOS world, TV iOS world, Android, and soon to be in Roku. And we've also developed a live streaming DCP player. And what this will do is push JPEG XS down to cinemas, so we can do live that same show could be done on a slightly elevated level, down to motion picture theaters throughout the world. AWS is our infrastructure partner with pushing all this information out there. And so when an artist is doing a particular show, let's say they're playing SoFi Stadium for 75,000 people, they could take that same show with the same production costs as far as they're concerned. Obviously a lot of planning, and there's an overlay of techniques and gear that comes in there, but they could quite easily go out to 30, 40 million people for that exact same show with a small lift from their part. That's basically what we're up to.
And Jackie, you're also working on a new model. Would you talk about that?
Sure, thanks for having me. So look, movie theaters do better when they have a wealth of content that allows consumers to experience a variety of human emotions. I love, hearing from both of you about how important it was not just to capture the concert, right? It's not just about the concert, but Sam, you said when you're even thinking about a venue, it's about being able to find the right energy, capture that energy and translate it, because it's different live than on screen. So you have to take something that people were processing live and then allow people in an auditorium to also feel that and experience it. And so I think that's so wonderful, and you can see the numbers, right? It works. If people feel like they can feel that live excitement, they're gonna come out. And so, one of the things that my partners and I are working on, we sat and we listened to movie theater owners, we listened to filmmakers, we listened to consumers for a combined 60 years. And the answer was always, we want more, right? There were challenges for theaters around the country and around the globe to get the movies that they thought their audiences wanted. And now we're seeing quite a lot of movies and other types of options not really being distributed, right? And some of them are just sitting on shelves places because no one knows how to get them out there and how to market them. And so one of the really interesting things about the Taylor Swift concert specifically, but also all of these concerts, is that you have an ability now to connect directly with fans. And it's really difficult to feel like a fan alone. And so when you get to have any way to communally experience fandom, it's amazing. And so Taylor Swift, obviously, she has so many online followers, and she was able to mobilize them effectively, really quickly. But even some of these other concert series that you showed, there's obviously many years between when the first one was and now. And we have a lot more ways to connect with those audiences, loyalty programs, Instagram followers, all of that can be done really affordably. So it's hard to, invest a lot of money in deciding whether to put something out there. But now we're starting to see that we can actually do it in a way that's effective. So what my partners and I are working on, one of our projects is a software-based platform. And the idea there is it's a marketplace that will connect filmmakers, distributors, with exhibitors directly. And not only that, but it'll allow a different range of booking options. Right now, many of the booking decisions are based on past decisions. So if you don't have a comp, this type of movie did well in this theater, then no one distributes it. And a large reason for those comps and decisions were because it was expensive. It was really expensive to put a film reel in a theater, and then there was a virtual print fee, which I'm sure everyone in this room knows about, and that made it just as expensive. But now we don't have those virtual print fees, and so it's very affordable to get a movie to a theater. And so we shouldn't only be looking backwards. We should be looking at where are fans of Taylor Swift located? Where are most of her followers? What do her followers have in common? What are the demographics in this area? And do a broader path, and then also allow exhibitors to say, you didn't pick my theater, I know my audience, give me that movie. And you can just expand the range of options so easily in a way that just hasn't really been done before. So it's really exciting to hear about the opportunity to have more live experiences, what you're describing. Our audiences want more.
Since we have a SMPTE audience, a question that we should certainly ask are there any technologies or capabilities that you don't have access to today that you would like to? Because I think we have some people in the audience who could help.
I think one of the main things is a lot of the technologies are starting to emerge now that allow this to be possible. The ability to 2110, things along those lines, just the ability to transport very, very high quality audio and picture through the internet. Before you had to rely on dedicated dark fiber networks and things along those lines. Now that infrastructure is actually getting really, really sophisticated, as you will see as you go around the AWS booths and Akamai and all these various other CDN folks. So I think the ability to sort of decentralize very, very high performance data is getting better and better every day. And I think in the next few years, this is going to get easier and easier to do. Obviously, you have to create processes in there. It's not just pushing data. You have to capture things correctly. You have to process them correctly. You have to deliver them correctly in such a way that you actually you're making a live movie, essentially, if you're doing the live aspect of it. There is still a lot of problems on the consumption side of things. So we run. I'm from the audio world, so we run into a lot of problems as far as just loudness monitoring things that are on the broadcast world versus live or motion picture world. If we're pushing anything through a streamer, let's say, for example, and I hate to keep coming back to Taylor, but that's the most recent example. But it happened to a lot of other folks that we worked with. We did the thing with Justin Timberlake. We had exactly the same problem, where once you start pushing into broadcast standards, it doesn't work well for concert work because it's designed to be energy over time, as far as sound is concerned. So it works perfectly for Everybody Loves Raymond, where there's talk, silence, talk, silence, talk, silence. You do something that any concert, any one of the ones we've been talking about, there's a lot of constant energy in there. So what happens when they get broadcast, they either get really squished and dynamically constricted, or just played exceptionally low. And that's a purely automated process. And so we had this issue actually with the last incarnation of the Taylor thing on streaming on Disney Plus. Dolby were nice enough to make some provisions for us, but even so, it is nothing like the actual presentation that you might have in a theater or live, just because of the lack of dynamic range in that world. So what we're working on in our app and our distribution, we don't necessarily have to adhere to broadcast standards. So we do not have the loudness issues. We can basically push at the same dynamic range as you would do theatrically or live, which gives us an advantage. But I think one of the disadvantages at the moment is the distributions that are classic are still held ransom by some of the things that are actually often imposed by SMPTE that really don't work that well for what we're doing, which is music or high energy content. And you talk about technologies that have evolved with a great way of distributing information, but I think we have to go back and reevaluate some of the pre-existing formats or ways of dealing with this technology just to make it more appropriate for what we want to do into the future.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to talk about standards. There are a lot of innovations that sometimes can be hampered by the politics of standards when you have lots of stakeholders. I know that I'm not going to get into the sound level too much, but I was probably visibly reacting to the fader level.
You have to speak up. I'm deaf. Sorry.
The number of meetings that I went to try to solve this film fader level issue was, I cannot count them, and it's a trailer problem more than anything, and to get the trailers quieter is impossible because it's become an arms race for volume. And so the people that care about the sound aren't the same as the marketing people, and it becomes a decision paralysis, which is, it speaks to the fact, again, like something that you were just mentioning about decentralization. I do think, aside from things like that, there are a lot of opportunities right now because of the flexibility, because of technology, where we can really look at what's been going on for 100 years and try to do it differently, because much of the way that the cinema part of the business is operated has not changed much. Yes, we went from film to digital, but in many ways, from an audience perspective and even from an operations perspective, not that much is different. But right now we can do that. And so allowing more information to come in, let's be a little more curious, let's curate and be flexible, let's evaluate how can we do better. I think that that's exactly where we're at. I think we're at a point where we should be asking a lot of questions, experimenting a lot, and being willing to actually take in that information. Did this work? Did this not work? And technology is the best way to do that. And so the people in this room are probably going to have great ideas, and we should try them all.
Exactly.
Anything you'd like to add? Okay. Okay, I think we have a question.
Question for, well, if we hear the microphone, question for Sam. Your timeline that you showed, did you do a live cut, and how many of the cameras did you actually have? Did you record every camera ISO and for post-production purposes?
It varies project to project. So the timeline I was showing was a live cut, and so for that scenario we did. For something like Taylor or Billy, that's a fully ISO project that we take back to post, and we still do a loose kind of camera script, so that we kind of understand how we're moving around the camera plot. But we always end up starting from scratch once we get to the edit. But yeah, anything that goes to post, anything that we take to post, we always record everything.
So I know it was raised the question about how the audio was transferred. Maybe I'll elaborate a little bit more on that side of things for the show. We're basically there were multiple microphones in the physical venue that were captured across the 3 nights. Every instrument was brought in as a discrete element that came to us to mix finally. She plays and sings everything live. Her and her band are very capable people, and it was basically what they mixed with on the physical venue. That's what we got to remix with once it came into post-production.
Would you elaborate on, when you're in the planning stage, what you're thinking about that as far as bringing these concerts downstream to broadcast and streaming?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Oh, could you elaborate on the kind of things you're thinking about as you're, in pre-production and producing these shows that apply to downstream for broadcast and streaming?
I mean, as far as we're concerned, you know, we are our own distribution system, so we don't really have to adhere to a lot of those standards. But obviously, you want to shoot at the best resolution. I mean, this is something obviously Sam should be talking about. You want to capture as best you possibly can. It's easy to downscale. It's easy to cut off to all these various other formats, you know, IMAX, so on and so forth. And you know, to go from if you have a good quality video, to go across to HDR for Dolby Digital aspects of it. So you know, I guess the answer is to